Hello, here we go with Chapter 6, Duels in the Arena. The arenas of Epic's great cities were intended to be practice grounds. You took your character along, and you could practice combat in an environment where it did not matter if you died. You simply reappeared at the entrance. It was a chance to discover how effective your weapons and spells were, and to improve your skills. Over the years, public battle in the amphitheatre had become the method of conflict resolution. The arena at New Haven was enormous, a massive stone structure with steps rising from the wide circular theatre at the centre to dizzying heights at the back. Statues of warriors lined the perimeter, facing the amphitheatre, silent and unresponsive witnesses to the centuries of battle that had taken place on the sandy floor far below them. Today, the amphitheatre seats were about a third full, mostly with the dull grey figures which represented people watching the game via their characters. Here and there, standing out in their colour and definition, NPCs were also in attendance. Eric was present in his persona as Cinderella. Beside him were Bjorn, Ingeborg, B.E., and B.E.'s younger sister Sigrid, all in their characters, a warrior, a witch, another warrior, and a healer respectively. Many families in Hope District had stopped work and were clipped up to Epic to watch the duel. It was an occasion that justified a break in their labour. For a huge national event, such as the final rounds of the annual graduation, the amphitheatre would be near full. For a small district appealing against central allocations, they had done well to fill even a fifth of the seats, especially as none of the other cases due that day had any planetary significance. It was with some impatience that Eric heard an announcement across the amphitheatre. Case number 133, year 1124. Snorri the Warrior versus Central Allocations. Snorri the Warrior from Estvam accuses Central Allocations of unfairly denying his wife a hip operation. The contest will be to the death. Random terrain. A warrior entered the amphitheatre, half covered in chainmail and carrying an axe. A few cheers went up for him, and he waved to the loudest part of the crowd. Poor man, Ingeborg said, and her tone reflected the genuine pity in her real voice. What chance has he got? What chance has any of us got? Uttered Bjorn glumly. From that uncharacteristic remark, Eric realised that Ingeborg and Bjorn were as nervous as he was. They were just better at not showing it. After all, both their parents were going into the amphitheatre, and with them a life savings of arms, armour and spells. All week, people from the district had been visiting their characters in the world of Epic and giving them presents, such as healing potions or pieces of armour. But it was going to be nearly as difficult for a district team as an individual to beat central allocations. Jeers and boos alerted Eric to the arrival of the central allocations warrior, Ragnok Strongarm. I know why I hate him, for killing my mum, but why does all the crowd shout out against him? Eric found the stadium's response to the CA warrior bemusing, although he was glad to add his voice to the catcalls. Well, he is new to central allocations. He has achieved very little in the game of Epic outside of the arena, but Hope District dislikes him because he killed the agricultural school headmistress when she fought for the school to have another tractor, B.E. replied. And he led a team which defeated Green Rocks when they objected to the changing of their crops to rapeseed, Bjorn added grimly. Ah yes, I'd forgotten that, B.E. said, nodding. Bowing to the crowd, Ragnok Strongarm seemed to be enjoying the jeers. He waved repeatedly, although not to his opponent. When his cloak was cast aside, it was evident that Ragnok was a she-elf, tall and slender, with long silver hair in several braids to keep it from his face. His armour glittered with blue and gold light. B.E. whistled in appreciation. That chainmail alone has got to be worth 10,000 bezants. Combatants ready. 3, 2, 1, begin. In a blink, the floor of the amphitheatre had changed. Suddenly, it was a pool of clear, deep blue water. Platforms were moving around upon its surface as though they were performing a highly ritualized dance. There were cheers and laughter from the crowd. This was a rare terrain. I love having practice on this, said Eric, his appreciation of the unusual dual conditions lifting him out of his nervous silence for a moment. Did you ever try it? The trick is to pick a route across. It actually is harder than it looks. If you get the wrong platform first, you'll go well astray. This is the terrain that mages dream of, B.E. mused aloud. Imagine being a fighter and having to make your way across while spells are coming down around your ears. With a loud shriek, an arrow flew through the air and struck the Estvan warrior. Ragnar's Strongarm was making no effort to cross to his opponent, but had calmly strung his bow and was watchfully preparing his next shot. The Estvan warrior, without a bow, was desperately trying to pick across the pool, jumping from island to island, trying to predict the motion of the platforms. Another shrieking missile. The warrior was struck in mid-leap and spun into the water. He disappeared and did not come up. The water was clear enough for the spectators to be able to see him struggling to remove his heavy boots as he sank. His last convulsions silenced the crowd. The conflict has been resolved in favour of central allocations. Ragnar bowed and departed as the amphitheatre reset itself. Ugh, what a horrible way to die. His armour must have dragged him down. Even from the limited expression available to the grey polygons of her healer, Eric could see the wince of young Sigrid. Eric felt sick. It was their turn next, and he could not see how they would avoid being butchered with similar ease. Case number 134, year 1124. Hope District versus Central Allocations. Hope District accuses Central Allocations of discrimination in the allocations of solar panels. The contest will be to the death. Survivors of the winning team will be resurrected. Random terrain. Huge cheers filled the amphitheatre as the Hope team entered. Even the normally placid Bjorn was shouting himself hoarse. It brought tears to Eric's eyes to see his friend bellowing for all his worth. While Bjorn's character remained grey, Eric knew that across in the Rolfsons' house he would be flushed bright red from his efforts to spur on their team. The Hope Challenge was taken up by those families with most to gain from any new panels, who, in the first instance, were the residents of Osterfjord. It was strange to see his lifelong neighbours in the amphitheatre. How difficult it was to believe the heroic-looking figures crossing the sand were the olive growers who lived just a few hundred yards away. One of the Hope team was wrapped deep in a cloak, with his hood drawn right over his head. The others were waving back to the crowd. Eric felt a nudge. With a nod of her head, Ingeborg indicated to the amphitheatre. "That must be your dad." "It must be. I wonder why he is covered up," B.E. wondered aloud. "So do I." An unexpected rush of happiness filled Eric's eyes with tears. He did not have his parents' trust. They had told him nothing of the mystery of Harold's character. But he could be trusted. After all, hadn't he kept the story of his broken tooth a secret? "It must be to keep a surprise for the Central Allocations team," Ingeborg suggested. Even though the medium of the game masked her tearful eyes, Ingeborg's sympathetic glance at Eric suggested she understood something of his feelings. The Central Allocations team entered and the crowd grew silent. "Bloody vengeance!" B.E. put his face in his hands. "What?" Sigrid was jittery as she turned to her brother. "They've brought out their best team, I would say." B.E. peeked through his fingers. "Halfdan the Black, Wolf, Hlid the Necromancer, Thorkel the Spellcaster, and Brynhild the Valkyrie. That's 4 Dragonslayers amongst them." The Hope team, whose brave appearance had lifted the crowd, now appeared shabby, beside the scintillating garments and powerful magical appearance of its opponents. Around Halfdan, light itself seemed diminished, apart from a black glow from his boots. The strange shadows cast from his armour caused those who stood near him to appear to be just the human form of enormous, distorted-shaped demons lying on the ground. The level of noise from the audience dropped. Conversations became subdued. "We don't have a chance, do we, B.E.?" Sigrid looked up at her brother, who just gave an unhappy shrug. "Combatants ready. 3, 2, 1, begin." The amphitheatre flowed in an instant to form a rocky area, with some stacks of boulders reaching to shoulder height. The Hope team hesitated then, having said something to each other, ran for cover. Only 4 of them reached the rocks they were aiming for. Eric could see no sign of his dad. "Where's Harold?" asked Bjorn. "Invisibility?" suggested B.E. "Oh, how wonderful! Let's hope so!" Ingeborg clapped, her enthusiasm encouraging them all to be more hopeful. The Central Allocations team was in no hurry to close on its opponents. Its spellcasters were chanting, while Halfdan and Brynhild, the 2 warriors, stood confidently before them, on guard. Wolf strode out and shouted a command in a strange guttural language. With a gasp from the crowd, he transformed himself into a large, fierce-looking black wolf and began to howl. In contrast with the last fight, the crowd was absolutely attentive, and the few voices that called out were very distinct. Eric desperately wished he was down there with the Hope team. but with a character powerful enough to withstand those legendary opponents. Above the amphitheatre, the clouds rumbled and gathered. A great shadow fell over them all, and Eric could feel the pressure of the sky. "Oh no," groaned B.E. "It's Thorkel the spellcaster. He's going to cast a lightning strike." Almost as one, the thousands of people in the crowd were cowering in anticipation of the terrible crack in the sky as a blast of lightning was wrenched from it by the spell. Some had their hands over their ears. Then they were on their feet cheering. The dark skies dissolved, and the sun broke through to gleam on the white silicate of the boulders in the arena floor. "What? What?" Eric leapt up to see Thorkel writhing on the ground, his pale blue sigil-covered robe becoming covered in dirt, white foam around his lips. A slender elf was retreating, whirling 2 short swords before him in a glittering, mesmerizing pattern. Then, with a cheeky bow to the crowd, the elf stepped into a shadow and disappeared. Ingeborg leapt up beside Eric, bright eyes searching for his. "Eric! It's your dad! It's your dad!" His friends were around him now, slapping his back and cheering. "He has to be a master thief!" B.E. shook his head. "Who would have believed that in Hope we had a master thief?" "Yes, yes!" Pushing aside his friends, Eric leapt to his feet, fists clenched. "That's for my mum!" He did a little jig and punched the air. "Die, all of you, die!" he shouted as loudly as he could at the remaining 4 members of the Central Allocations team. The crowd was on its feet still, cheering on the Hope team. B.E. shook his head with disbelief. "I had no idea so many people would take our side. They must feel the same way about Central Allocations." Wolf gave a great howl and raced towards the Hope team, but Halfdan the Black was looking around as though panicked. He swung his great 2-handed sword back and forth, nervously looking for his enemy. Brunhild, acting with a confidence more in keeping with her winged helmeted Valkyrie, grabbed him and said something to his ear. Then they stood back to back, with Hlide between them, astride the body of Thorkel. That's quite a long chapter, so we'll have to leave it there, and we'll find out how the fight finishes tomorrow. Bye.